The crisis team's biggest challenge may simply be to keep school life as routine as possible as its students learn about the impact of war in their daily lives rather than from a history book. In Clarksville, Nancy Amons, Channel 4 News.
We'll have another update in 30 minutes.
We've been talking this evening with our correspondents in the Pentagon, in the Persian Gulf, and most recently in Israel. And we just repeat the latest dispatch we had from Israel. Of course, we've been waiting to see whether the Israeli government's going to decide to retaliate for the Iraqi missile attacks against Israel, missiles that hit in Haifa and in Tel Aviv, causing light casualties and damages overnight. The chief of staff of the Israeli armed forces, that's General Dan Shomron, is quoted as saying that this kind of an attack, quote, cannot go without a response. Such an incident requires a response, but that does not mean that the response has to come right now. So again, through this day, the Israelis have a lot of very important military but also political decisions to make, because a lot is at stake in terms of this coalition. Although those of you who have been with us throughout the evening with Tom Brokaw and his discussions with various experts probably recall that one of the themes that has been arising today is that even if the Israelis were to respond with a limited attack, let us say that is with some of their missiles, Jericho missiles targeted at Iraqi targets, and not send Israeli planes in, piloted aircraft, that perhaps that would mitigate a bit of the Israeli response. And therefore the coalition, the alliance, would not be bruised, would not fall apart. The other factor really to keep in mind here is that the Israelis understand full well, I mean, they are perhaps the paramount military specialists in that part of the region, of the importance of keeping this coalition together, and also of just how well the airstrikes are working right now against Iraq. And as Henry Kissinger said earlier on our NBC coverage, one of the things you want to make sure of right now is that you're not thrown off course. If things are going so well so far, keep on that course, and that, of course, is what the White House has no doubt been telling the Israelis this evening, but the Israelis are fully capable of understanding that themselves, so we shall see. Let's now go over to Arthur Kent, who is in Saudi Arabia, standing by. Arthur, we're really going back and forth between the Israeli story and what's happening there this morning in Saudi Arabia. What do you have for us?
Well, Garrick, we have nothing official, of course. The last thing that we will see is official pronouncements on how the raid last night on Israel might affect the relationship of the various Arab and Western partners to this U.S.-led anti-Iraq coalition. But we can tell you that the Saudis and the Kuwaitis in particular, who participated a great deal in yesterday's strikes against military targets in Iraq and Kuwait, will be very eager not to read into this situation anything which would break up the unity of the alliance that has, according to Pentagon sources, done so well against targets in those two countries. Saudi Arabia, of course, put forward about 150 aircraft in the early stages, in the first two waves of the attacks. The Kuwaitis put the remnants of the Kuwaiti Air Force up in the air yesterday and actually lost a jet shot down by Iraqi anti-aircraft fire. So it would be very interesting today to try to pick up in the Saudi press official pronouncements here, any sort of rumblings which might indicate disquiet. But we don't predict it unless Israel goes to an extreme retaliatory strike against Iraq.
Well, Arthur, to follow up on that point, I think one of the things we should really point out is that although the Arab nations have been by and large united against Israel, with the exception of Egypt, which has established diplomatic relations with the Israeli government, Saudi Arabia and Kuwait are not what they call in the Middle East or the Arab world front-line confrontation states. That is basically Syria, which has occupied that role. Syria, which has fought a number of wars with the Israelis and come out on at the short end of the stick on most of those wars. Do you have any indication there as to whether the Saudis are concerned about Hafez al-Assad and the Syrians, whether they might weaken a bit if the Israelis were to respond?
Very interesting question, Garrick. I mean, the dynamics now of Arab politics within this region, now that Saddam Hussein, the strong man who occupied a locus between so many competing powers, not only Syria and Saudi Arabia, but Iran to the east, seems to be on the way down, seems to be about to be eliminated. We cannot read too much into what we've heard here because, of course, the Saudi royal family, which dominates the governing elite in Saudi Arabia, has played very close to its chest exactly how the new order of Arab politics might be once Saddam is removed. But we can tell you that in these preliminary stages, the priority for the Saudi government has been, to the relief of Washington thus far and the Bush administration, a show of solidarity, both in the skies over Iraq and Kuwait, and in political statements, continuing condemnation of Saddam. And again, if Israel does not react with too much force, if it does not overreact to these strikes last night, it will tend to play down any kind of disunity that results from any statements or actions taken by Israel in the forthcoming days.
Okay, Arthur Kent, thank you for that fill-in. But before you go from the heavy matters of the moment to something perhaps a little bit lighter, but I'm sure people are curious about it. The morning weather forecast, please, there in Saudi Arabia. What's it like? We see there is sun. How warm?
Again, another surprise. The desert brings them, puts them to you almost daily. Overcast only an hour ago, and now a bright sun scorching through. We're back down to a shirt sleeve weather on the ground. Clear skies for aircraft taking off out of their bases in Saudi Arabia and other Gulf states, off the aircraft carriers out in the Red Sea and in the Gulf. We can only guess, but that this weather pattern holds true for Kuwait, some 250 miles north of here. It's going to aid them, obviously. It will also be another day in daylight operations of testing whether that Iraqi Air Force is indeed completely suppressed, whether air defenses, as the Scuds did last night, will provide U.S. and coalition aircraft with any surprises when they close on their targets today.
All right, Arthur Kent, thank you very much. In Saudi Arabia, and of course, those clear blue skies are going to be important not just for the Air Force and Navy pilots headed north. It's also good news for those people who have to read and analyze the satellite pictures that are being sent back, have been sent back since the daybreak broke after the first wave of air attacks. And that's something that the Pentagon has been concentrating on, and Jamie Gangel has taken over there. Good evening, Jamie.
Good, I think it's good morning.
Good morning,
Derek,
I should say. It depends what part of the country you are in. But do you have any indication as to what the satisfaction level might be in terms of the satellite reports they're getting back? I mean, there must be hundreds or thousands of them they have to go through.
They're certainly going through that now, getting battle assessments. But I just want to go back for a second to one thing that Arthur was talking about with these Scuds. What we're being told here repeatedly, Garrick, is to be cautious and remember that this can happen again. Although they took out a lot of the hard-based Scud missiles, the word here is that for these mobile base missiles that can move around, the Scuds, that at best maybe 20 or 30% were taken out. And so there's still a lot of concern, and again stress that what happened tonight in both Israel and Iran can happen again.
If we look not just at the issue of the Scuds, but just the issue of another aspect of this war, which is information flow. Now, I'm sure people have been watching our program, following the events. They're staying up late in many parts of the country. Any indication as to when we're going to get another dose of plain old-fashioned information as to what's happening?
It's tough. The next briefing will be at 7 a.m. East Coast time. That will be by General Schwarzkopf from Saudi Arabia. One of the things that was stressed to me tonight by a senior Pentagon official who had been doing very much the same thing during the Panama invasion was that there everything was on about the same time frame. Here we have an 8-hour difference between the East Coast and Saudi Arabia. Then you have troops that are even further out, so that the base in Saudi is waiting for reports to come back from all over the desert and front lines there. So there's quite a bit of lag time, and that's very frustrating here. Frequently, they're hearing about things first, frankly, by watching us on television.
When we talk about information and about briefings, it'll be interesting to see and hear General Schwarzkopf. He's a man I think most or many Americans have become well familiar with, not only a very experienced combat leader, a combat officer, but a man of a particular turn of mind. And from the Pentagon side, the man in uniform we've been seeing most often is General Powell, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Do you think the Pentagon will start to be bringing other uniformed senior officers out to brief the public and the press, or are they going to stick with Powell and Schwarzkopf?
Well, we're hearing, in fact, that Tom Kelly, who's #2 at the Joint Chiefs, will be doing some briefing tomorrow, so we will see some other people coming in. But the fact of the matter is that both General Powell and Schwarzkopf are very impressive. They've come across very well. The building is clearly comfortable with them. The White House is clearly very comfortable with the job that they've been doing. So I'm sure we're going to see a lot more of both of them.
All right. Thank you very much, Jamie Gangel at the Pentagon. Interesting aspect about General Schwarzkopf, of course, he has a very distinguished career. He also has a great deal of family experience in the Middle East, the Persian Gulf region. His father served the U.S. government as an advisor to Iran many years ago. This is before the present regime, the successors of Ayatollah Khomeini, came to power there. He was an advisor on police and security matters. So General Schwarzkopf grew up in a family which was aware of and sensitive to the various dynamics, the forces at play in the Middle East. And several weeks ago, shortly after he arrived there, in fact, he gave an interview which was interesting, showed that he had a political insight as well as military experience, saying that we must be careful not to destroy Iraq, not to destroy its military forces, because that would create instability, a vacuum. That's one of the things we've been talking about with Gary Sick, who is back with us, among others, that General Schwarzkopf, a military man, has this kind of touch, so to speak, for the area, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. And that's really very, I should think, reassuring for all of us, to think that we have military men, and having been a military man, I have a certain sense about that. But to find people that are scholars in uniform, people who know something about the area that they're working in, and who are, in fact, sensitive to political issues as well. And I think that's a wonderful choice for our commander there.
And we have it not only in General Schwarzkopf, who's the man on the ground there, we also have it in Colin Powell, four-star general, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, who was national security advisor.
And before that, we had it with Bill Crow, the Admiral Crow, who was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, a PhD from Princeton, political scientist, long political experience as well. I mean,
so in a way, the job description for the jobs at the top of the military ladder has been going through some evolution, hasn't it?
I think it really has, yes. I mean,
now, Gary Sick, you worked for several years in the National Security Council at the White House, really concerning yourself with affairs in Iraq, Iran, the Persian Gulf area. People who really follow this, look at this, we see a Jim Baker, we see a Dick Cheney out there, but just below this, these top officials, what's happening there in the White House these days, in that National Security Council area? We see very often the lights burning late in Brent Scowcroft's office there in the corner in the West Wing. Give us a bit of the atmosphere.
Well, they work almost as hard as you journalists.
Probably a lot harder. I hope they know a lot more, too.
Usually not, unfortunately. And that's one of the things that I think is most surprising to people on the outside, is that you think that these people must have all of this wonderful information at hand, fingertip feel for everything. Well, they have a lot of classified information that you and I don't have to work with, but 99% of the really important information is the stuff that is known, if not that day, is known within a day or two, and you can put it together in a political analysis and the like. I found, frankly, with virtually all of the intelligence information of the government available to me, that I ended up relying on press reports, news reports from around the world, the kind of thing that not everybody just reads, but which is basically unclassified, as was the most insightful. A full text of a speech by a foreign leader is worth more than a secret report of a third-hand report of a conversation that he had that is reported by the CIA.
And here it is, we, the journalists, thinking that you fellows in the National Security Council have all this information, this classified information we can't get our hands on.
That's right. Well, sometimes the classified information is quite important, and especially on a tactical basis. I was thinking, think about it. Today, we are in the midst of the largest bombing campaign in the history of the world.
Even, let's stop right there, even greater than World War II?
Absolutely. This is the most intensive bombing campaign in the history of the world. And today, we didn't hear about a single target being struck. We don't know how many sorties took off. We don't know where they went. We don't know what collateral damage there was. The Iraqis aren't talking about it. Our forces aren't talking about it. We know virtually nothing. This whole war has been going on around us, and it's invisible.
Is this proper?
I don't think so. I mean, I think we should be. I'm not a journalist. I've been spending a lot of time around journalists in recent days, but I really think that we should have some sense. Are there factories being hit as opposed to military sites? What kind of collateral damage is? What are those satellite photos showing? We just learned after they fired the missiles at Israel, we discovered that the first strike really only got a small proportion of the Scud launches. We'd been led to believe that the Scud launchers were really wiped out.
Well, let's follow up on this. The fact that we aren't getting more information, does that raise the suspicion in your mind that although the raids on the whole seem to be going very well, we aren't there yet, that there are still some points of...
well, it makes me a little nervous because when the people doing it are in control of the information totally, they have the capability of concealing mistakes, problems, things that go wrong, get glossed over. And to some degree, that perhaps is inevitable. I mean, there's nothing you can do about that in wartime, and they give you pretty much what you want. But the information flow has been so minute here that I'm not suspecting anybody of a cover-up or anything. I just think that the people in a democracy deserve to know more about what their forces are actually doing.
Well, we'll see how the information comes out in the hours to come. Gary Sick, thank you very much, and continue to stand by. Just to resume where we are as we continue to follow events in the Middle East. Israel, of course, has been the big story tonight, the launching by Iraq of missiles against Israel. And we're going to have some tape of the situation there in just a moment. It happened during the middle of the night, Israeli time. It was a shock, although not a total surprise. The Israelis had braced themselves for that, preparing for attacks, perhaps gas or chemical warfare attacks. In the event, what were fired off were approximately 10 or so missiles from Iraqi territory, the Scud missiles, which is a Soviet-based built missile, fired at Israeli targets. One of them struck near the city of Haifa. Several others struck near Tel Aviv. They did cause some damage there. They caused injuries to about 7 people, according to the Israeli government, among 7 Israelis, but not serious. Then, of course, the events in Baghdad, the scenes last night during the initial airstrike, some spectacular scenes. We've been showing these to you periodically through the day and the evening, but the pictures speak for themselves. This was Baghdad, middle of the night, videotaped there from a hotel shortly after the air assault began. You can hear the sound of exploding bombs and cruise missiles, the Tomahawk missiles, and occasionally see some ground fire from the anti-aircraft defenses. That was Baghdad last night. Also, as we look at this mosaic, the total panorama of what is happening, not only in the battle area, the war theater itself, but also on the home front. Another aspect are demonstrations that have been occurring here and there. We have some videotape of that in terms of people really voicing their opinions. This San Francisco, California. A crowd there, newspaper headline telling the story. To some people, perhaps a bit reminiscent of the Vietnam era, although by no means are these demonstrations the size of what happened then when streets and boulevards and large portions of large cities were filled by angry protesters. In San Francisco, some people were arrested by the police early in the day. They broke a human chain there, which is around a federal building. So earlier tonight, Tom Brokaw talked to Ron Kovic, who was a Vietnam veteran. I'm sure you've heard about him. He was injured there severely and has become a symbol and one of the more articulate voices in the anti-war rallies. And Tom talked to Ron Kovac, who was at a rally in Westward in California. Here's what they said.
UCLA, and I just want to report to you that over 700 students have taken over the main administration building. They are planning to shut down the entire campus tomorrow. And this is a very powerful peace movement that's growing across this country. And I think, Tom, with what's happening in the Middle East, you are going to see an extremely powerful anti-war movement growing very rapidly in this country. There is a cry that's going out amongst thousands and thousands of us, and that is, bring our young men and women home, let them live. We do not want this war, and we want the killing and the bombing to stop, Tom. We are against this killing, we are against this bombing, and we know that there has got to be a peaceful solution. We're crying out for peace all over this country, and we're going to sit down in the streets. We're going to take over the bridges, the buildings. We're going to sit in the senator's office and the congressman's offices. We're going to take over the universities peacefully and non-violently. But if we have to shut down this whole country, Tom, we're going to do that.
Ron Kovac, what about the chances for a peaceful solution? Saddam Hussein was given every conceivable opportunity to withdraw his troops from Kuwait, and he took none of them. You cannot deal with this man, it seems, from a diplomatic or a political point of view. Ultimately, how would you deal with him?
We must avoid killing, and we must avoid the destruction of other human beings and innocent civilians, Tom. There are ways, there is dialogue, there is still room for peace. And I feel that more and more people across this country are beginning to oppose the president and the war makers. We're not going to stand for this war, Tom. We are not going to stand for this killing. We are better Americans than that. We are better Americans than that, Tom. We want peace, and we know that this is not the way to go.
Ron.
They killed a million Vietnamese and put the names of 58,000 of my friends on a wall in Washington, D.C. We're not going to let them do it again, Tom. We're not going to let them do it again.
Vietnam veteran Ron Kovac speaking earlier this evening from a rally in California with Tom Brokaw here in New York. Speaking of demonstrations, one of the questions we've been posing this evening is why there has not been a reaction, a public reaction, demonstrations or worse in Arab countries in the Middle East following the start of the war there. Let's get some opinions in Washington from two Middle East experts we've been talking with on and off this evening, Robert Lieber and Joyce Starr. Joyce, let's start with you. When do you think we're going to get some kind of a response from the man and the women in the street in Arab capitals?
Well, I think that we need to talk about which Arab capitals, because in Turkey, for example, the president of Turkey, Turgut Özal, has been so staunchly with the United States, and I think the people are going to be behind their president. In the case of Syria, obviously the people do what Mr. Assad would like them to do. In the case of Egypt, we may see some limited demonstrations, but I think it will come down to just that if Israel should attack. So country by country, we should make our analysis rather than a broad brush look about the man in the street. Each man is different in each Arab capital, not to mention each woman.
All right, let's be specific. Jordan. Now, throughout this crisis, we've seen big crowds in Jordan. Robert Lieber, many Palestinians there. A majority of the people in that country are Palestinians. A great deal of sympathy for Saddam Hussein. They see Saddam as their hero. Why aren't we getting a reaction from Jordan?
Well, Jordan is perhaps two-thirds Palestinian, but the problem of the Palestinians is they're in disarray. Nobody much has helped them, not their own leaders, who have in many respects betrayed them or served them badly, not Saddam, who has used them as a convenient excuse, but who doesn't really care a thing for them. But you have to look at individual countries, and I think one of the tragedies in our analysis of the Arab world in this crisis is the willingness to embody cliches, to talk about the Arab world or the Arab nationalism, when in fact the reality is a great division among different countries and interests. Those countries closest to Saddam have got a pretty healthy distaste for him. Take the Egyptians, where millions of Egyptians served as workers in Iraq during the 1980s, especially in the war.
And they've been forced to come home now, haven't they?
They were brutally mistreated, and in fact the average Egyptian in the street rather than rising to these Saddam appeals to Arab nationalism and hating Zionism in the West in America, the average Egyptian in the street has a real loathing for Saddam.
Robert Lieber, Joyce, thank you. We'll be back after a break.
From Channel 4, this is a Gulf War News Extra.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sharon Puckett. Saddam Hussein had threatened to launch an attack on Israel if an American attack on Iraq began. Shortly after 6 o'clock Nashville time yesterday evening, that threat became a reality. Last night, Pentagon officials confirmed that Iraq fired several so-called Scud missiles toward Israel, striking several areas near the capital of Tel Aviv. There's no official word yet on casualties, and there's still conflicting reports on whether any chemical warheads were used. Late reports indicate Israel may retaliate for this attack. Although details are still sketchy, some video has been released of the attack area. The pictures show Israeli police donned with gas masks patrolling the area. Some citizens here in Middle Tennessee heard more about the attack via shortwave radio. The Israeli radio announcer only spoke of minor injuries as a result of the attack.
They are being treated, nothing to worry about. 7 people out of all the attacks, nothing is happening now, so you needn't put on gas masks, any of you anywhere in the country.
Iraq has also fired several missiles toward Saudi Arabia, although all of the missiles were either intercepted by other allied missiles or they completely overshot their targets. In Dhahran, air raid sirens wailed through the night as explosions lit up the dark Saudi Arabian sky. So far, there have been no report of casualties or injuries from the attack on Saudi Arabia. There are between 4,000 and 6,000 Tennessee National Guardsmen and reservists in the Saudi desert this morning. Some of them have played an important role already in the Allied attack on Iraq. Tennessee Guard officials say the 134th Air Refueling Group spent most of Wednesday night and Thursday in the air, refueling fighter jets and bombers making their assaults on Baghdad. Another Air Guard unit from Memphis was also active on the ground, loading the fighters and bombers. Adjutant General Carl Wallace of the Tennessee National Guard says he spoke with a half-dozen Guard troop units in the desert yesterday, and all seemed to be in high spirits. And another Tennessee Guard call-up is possible. The 568th Personnel Service Company of Smyrna has been placed on alert. Wallace says that even if it's activated, the company may remain stateside with a possible destination of Fort Knox, Kentucky. With the onslaught of war, family members of Tennessee National Guard soldiers may be in need of special assistance. The Tennessee National Guard is offering a special family assistance program which offers counseling and financial help for families in need. Those needing help can call one of 2 numbers established by the Tennessee National Guard. Those numbers are 252-3326 or 252-3329.
It's the people of the Insurance Mart that help solve your car insurance problems.
I've been in the insurance business in Memphis for over 25 years, and I can honestly say the Insurance Mart has the best rates.
I can say in all sincerity that if you are having a problem with car insurance, the Insurance Mart is where you need to be.
The Insurance Mart, we solve problems. Call us at Nashville, Rivergate, or Murfreesboro.
Feel great, look good, save money during Watson's Health and Fitness Sale. Relax in the bubbling hot water of a Watson's 5-person hot tub for only $19.99, or a 4-person spa only $14.99 complete with cover and chemicals. Get that deep dark tan from a Wolf Tanning Better Canopy, 9 models on display starting at $9.99. Rich Nordic Spruce Saunas for only $19.99 complete. 6 months, same as cash. Financing available. That's Watson's, 1182 Antioch Pike, Nashville.
3 days ago, a Nashville family was living in Israel. Last night, their homeland was bombed. Bill and Emily Kuhn arrived in Nashville Monday after warnings from the United States to leave. The couple says it was a difficult choice. After living in the country for 6 months, they had become attached.
We felt that it just wasn't worth the risk with our children to stay there, and we had terribly mixed feelings about leaving because we felt so emotionally attached to the country after living there.
The family went to the Middle East because Bill Kuhn was studying to become a rabbi. Part of his training was at the Hebrew Union College in Jerusalem. The Kuhns hope to return in February, but they say they'll have to wait and see how events unfold.
Taking a quick look at Nashville's weather, currently 35 degrees under cloudy skies, winds from the southwest at 5. The barometer 30.25 and rising, and the relative humidity 89%. Stay tuned to Channel 4 for continuing coverage of the latest developments of the Gulf War. NBC will bring you 24-hour coverage of the latest happenings in the Middle East, and Channel 4 will bring you local updates every half hour. Our next update, 12:55.
From NBC News, America at War continues. Here are Garrick Utley and Mary Alice Williams.
Good evening to you in the West. Good morning to you in the East. I'm Mary Alice Williams. As you well know, just 6.5 hours ago, Operation Desert Storm dramatically escalated. Iraq attacked Israel with its powerful Scud missiles, thought to have been taken out by American fighter jets. At first, there were fears that the missiles carried chemical weaponry. Now it is reported that they carried only conventional explosives. Still, there were some Israeli casualties. So far, Israel has not yet retaliated for the attack. The Knesset is about to meet under Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir to decide how to respond to the attack. Israel's ambassador to the United States says his country reserves the right to do so. American Secretary of State James Baker talked to Israeli leaders and assured them that U.S. forces were responding to the missile attack and would try to prevent any further attacks. President Bush condemned the attack and was said to be outraged by it. The attacks by Allied aircraft are continuing on Iraq and Kuwait as military leaders press their strategy of virtually non-stop assaults. We've seen pictures of last night's attack on Baghdad, with clear evidence of the anti-aircraft artillery being fired at American planes in the sky. The Pentagon has now identified the first American casualty of the war. Navy Lieutenant Commander Michael Spiker died when his FA-18 was shot down. He is officially listed as missing in action since his body has not been recovered. The Pentagon also says one Iraqi missile was fired at the big Allied base in Dhahran, Saudi Arabia. It was knocked down by a U.S. Army Patriot surface-to-air missile. That missile has never been used in combat before. Now we're going to check in with the Pentagon and see what the latest is from there. We will be checking in with the Pentagon in just a moment. As you know, it was fortuitous, in a way, that the Patriot missile was able to be fired since it had never been test-fired in combat before. That's something that the Pentagon was anxious about. Now they have had a sure test of that. As I said, for a time there was a fear that Saddam Hussein had done the unthinkable, attacked Israel with chemical weapons, nerve gas. It did not turn out to be the case. Nonetheless, it raises questions about not only Israel's response, but changes in a major way the shape of the Gulf War entirely and the military strategy that will have to be employed not only by the Allies, but by all sides. Most important, it raises doubts about the powerful multinational coalition of Western and Arab countries that is aligned now against Iraq and whether that coalition will hold. We're going to check in with Arthur Kent, standing by now in Dhahran, Saudi Arabia. Arthur?
Mary Alice, this couldn't have come at a worse time because it's been a major question during the deployment here and the preparation for any assault against Iraqi forces. Just how will the command and control setup of this 28-nation coalition force work in war? And the big question marks, of course, were the Arab participants. Saudi Arabia, very strategic, the host to U.S. and British forces and so many air forces here. The Egyptian force and the Syrians, sizable land forces and very meaningful Arab participants in any kind of offensive against Saddam Hussein. Now, last night, a strike against Israel, and the wild card of the whole equation is turned up. Will Israel attack Iraq, and what will be the consequences on this very makeshift and uneasy alliance? Yesterday, in the early stages of the attack, you saw a great deal of unity, you saw a great deal of coherence between the Saudis, the Kuwaitis, and the British and Americans, who were the first aircraft, the major thrust in the first assault on Saddam Hussein's forces. Now, if we saw early on, Mary Alice, a great willingness on the part of the Saudis to put forward a united stand denouncing Saddam Hussein. The religious leaders here in Saudi Arabia even passed a law and said there was legal precedent for staging war on a fellow Arab in this case, since he was the transgressor he was the aggressor rather, in Kuwait. But now, should Israel judge the actions last night worthy of a very harsh response, what will the effect of Israeli military retaliatory strike against Iraq be? Very serious question mark with Syria. Perhaps the Egyptians and the Saudis, having gotten this far and getting rid of a major belligerent in the region, Saddam Hussein, will look the other way, but it's a major question mark.
It's a trap, one presumes, set by Saddam Hussein to get Israel involved in the war, to turn the war into a giant Arab-Israeli conflict, which is what Saddam Hussein has wanted for a long time, and the Americans are, one presumes, working very hard diplomatically to make sure that Israel's response is a measured response. Arthur, there's been a dearth of information in terms of the military victories or not so victorious sorties out there. Do you know why?
Well, from the beginning of this operation, coming into a closed society such as Saudi Arabia and working with a very intensive military operation, journalists like ourselves were up against two major barriers. That is, we were working with a major military power, the Pentagon, and we were working with a government that was totally unused to working with journalists, the Saudi government. And through the months, as it became apparent that there may in fact, that the use of military power and an offensive against Saddam Hussein might be an operable option, the Pentagon started to talk about security needs, logistical problems, safety problems, the need to hone down to a sharper focus the number of journalists who would go anywhere near combat. And a system was devised based on pools, small groups of reporters who would go forward, witness and photograph and write about what they saw and come back and share their material with those who were left behind, the very much greater number of international journalists who are based here who cannot go to the front. The problem has been that since these pools are totally under the supervision of the Pentagon, we cannot request where the pools go. For instance, this morning we do not have available to us the opportunity to walk across the street and talk with the young men who released that Patriot anti-missile missile last night, knocking an Iraqi Scud from the sky before it landed on this air base here in northeastern Saudi Arabia. Significantly, we can't go out and do reaction among the troops to the rising chorus of dissent in the United States. So we're facing many problems, and we're trying to impress upon the Pentagon the need to loosen up as the days go on. Mary Alice?
Thank you very much. Arthur Kent in Saudi Arabia, and we'll be checking back with him through the night and the morning. Garrick?
Mary Alice, you and Arthur were just talking about the situation in Israel, and there's a cabinet meeting being held there. Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir called the cabinet into session and for a meeting, and he wants the cabinet to decide what the next step should be. And they put out a statement. Israel Radio reported the statement was, the United States has promised an appropriate response to the firing of the missiles by Iraq on Israel, and the government ministers will have to decide this morning whether they are satisfied for now with this American promise or whether Israel will activate on its own its right to self-defense. Larry Weidman of NBC News in Tel Aviv, let's follow up on this. Americans may not be really aware of the difference between the Israeli democracy and our democracy, in the sense that here a cabinet meeting doesn't really amount to all that much. That's not where the decisions are made. But in Israel it's quite different. The cabinet has to take these hard decisions, doesn't it?
Indeed, Garrick. And actually at this stage in Israel's life, the cabinet is maybe a little more unified than it has been in some years past, especially in the years of the National Coalition, where the Likud party shared power with the Labor Party. Now it's the Likud party and a coalition of other right-wing parties headed by Yitzhak Shamir as the Prime Minister. And it might be expected that they would be more inclined to a relatively strong response to any attack on Israeli territory. But of course, they also recognize the political realities of the American involvement with principally an Arab alliance,
Well, Larry, is there a political factor at all at work, at play in this? That is the opposition, and the Labour Party is a very large opposition in Parliament, in public opinion. Where does it stand? Is there a political angle to this, or is the nation really united in terms of these military tactics that should or should not be taken now?
I think it's fair to say that the country is united. Israel has a tendency to have a very bloody internal political scene when internal issues are being discussed. But when it's time to deal with an outside threat, the country pulls together, and even the most dovish elements tend to be pretty hawkish by our standards.
We saw something unusual several days ago when the number 2 man in the State Department, the Deputy Secretary of State Lawrence Eagleburger, was sent on a special mission quite suddenly to Israel. At the time, we now know, he was trying to persuade the Israelis to avoid any retaliation if such an incident as did happen this evening were to occur. The Israelis, of course, didn't give any promises, any commitments. But what that visit seemed to raise, of course, was to remind everybody of the fact that Israel, although acting independently in terms of its own security needs and, indeed, actions, also is very dependent on the United States for economic aid, for military aid above all. Several billions of dollars of aid every year going from the United States to Israel. Is that, let's use the word, is that a leverage or even a leash the United States can effectively use, or does it not really amount to very much come the end of the day?
Oh, I think, as you say, at the end of the day, there's a lot of talking about it, but I don't think at the end of the day it has a major effect on what Israel will decide to do. As I mentioned, there are political realities. There may be a school of thought that would say Israel, by agreeing to forego a response on a relatively minor attack, which is what this was this morning, by agreeing to forego that response and maintaining the low profile, they may feel there's a bill that will come due when this is all over, and it may come in some regards the Palestinian question or other military aid or more help for the settling of Soviet Jews. There are so many issues on the table, and so many of them are interconnected. It's hard to say that simply that $3 billion a year of military and other aid is going to be successfully used as a lever by the United States.
All right, Larry Weidman, one final question. Do we know when the cabinet meeting will take place? Usually it's midday there in Jerusalem, and...
Yes, Garrick, today is Friday, of course. The evening is the beginning of the Jewish Sabbath, and even in unusual times, it's very unusual for the government to meet after the Sabbath begins, which is actually about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The cabinet meeting, I don't believe has begun yet, but probably before noon, and the decision they take, we may not hear about for a few days, unless there's some overt action that comes out of it, but we'll have to wait and see.
All right, Larry Weidman, thank you. And the situation in Israel as the cabinet's about to meet. Mary Alice?
Thanks, Garrick. There has been a rising chorus of dissent around the world. In Germany, anti-war demonstrators marched by torchlight, 100,000 strong. Vandals smashed the U.S. Cultural Center windows in Berlin, among other things. People were weeping on the streets in Australia. There were sizable demonstrations in San Francisco tonight, at the Federal Building in West Los Angeles, and on the campus of UCLA. We're going now to Fernell Chapman of station KNBC. Fernell, what have you got?
Well, it's been a full day of anti-war activities here on the University of California campus in Los Angeles. Some students here boycotted classes all day. Others, some 3,000 of them, marched all about the campus in protest of Operation Desert Storm. Some 8 hours ago, a number of students, some of them you can see behind me here, they took over the university's administration building here at Murphy Hall. So far, there have been no arrests. It's been a very peaceful protest. The students are demanding a one-day suspension of all classes for an unlimited discussion of Middle East policy. Campus police have not shown up here. They have given the students until tomorrow morning to clear out so that business can get back to normal here at the university's administration building. However, the students say they have no intention of leaving, and they're hoping that other students on other campuses all across the country will follow their lead. Live from the University of Los Angeles, UCLA, I'm Fernell Chapman.
Fernell, before you leave, let me ask you this. What is the main reason for the protest? Is it war in general? Is it the reasons behind U.S. policy? What is it?
Well, it's twofold, actually. One, they are obviously opposed to the war. They want the U.S. troops out of the Middle East. And second, they're demanding a meeting with the chancellor here at UCLA. They, as I indicated earlier, are demanding a one-day suspension, a moratorium, a suspension of classes for one full day for unlimited discussions of the Middle East and what's happening over there.
Okay, thank you very much, Fennell Chapman. What goes around comes around. At the risk of telling you my age, it seems very familiar to what was happening when I was a freshman on a college campus a long time ago. Garrick.
Mary Ellis, this reporter will not ask you your age.
Thank you.
Anytime. It's now, what, 1:45 in the morning on the East Coast, a few hours earlier as we move west, and for some people, they're really the night owls now, and some people it's sort of late evening. And what we're really trying to do, Mary Ellis and I, and the NBC correspondents and our specialists we have on call in various ports of call, is to get a feeling as to what the events were of this day and where we are headed on Friday, the coming day, which is already well underway in the Persian Gulf area. And one of the questions that comes to mind, one of the weapons, is terrorism, the big T word. We haven't seen it yet. But let's get some insights from Joyce Starr, who is with us still in Washington, a Middle East expert. Joyce, we've seen how Saddam Hussein wasn't very effective in one weapon, his anti-aircraft defenses. He fired off a few Scud missiles. Not that effective either. The big weapon he has, which is not involving high technology, is terrorism. Why haven't we seen it so far?
I think that we've overestimated his capabilities in this area, Garrick. Let's look at it systematically. Number one, of course, it takes a lot of money to fund worldwide terrorism in a series of incidents of the kind that we've been anticipating. And Saddam Hussein, of course, has limited coffers. He made a big effort to take over the coffers of Kuwait, but most of that money was salvaged by the Kuwaiti government in England and elsewhere. So he doesn't have abundant resources. And secondly, his attention is riveted elsewhere. He obviously might have put something in place before the hostilities began, but since they began, his attentions are obviously fully absorbed in the war effort. And even so, even in the worst case, I do not think he's capable of the worldwide campaign that the media has been describing.
Of course, he is distracted by many things, and yet terrorism is one thing that could be planned for. The theory was abroad that he would have had his agents in place, particularly in the Middle East and in Europe, to strike at Western targets. And although it may cost a certain amount of money to hire these people and get them into place, it wouldn't seem to be beyond the means of Saddam Hussein. I know you're not saying that we're home free, that it is not going to happen by any means, but if it does happen, where would you see his terrorists striking first?
No, I think it can happen. There's a very strong possibility that it will happen, but I want to differentiate for the public because there's a great deal of fear between massive terrorism, where bombs are going off in Philadelphia and New York and Chicago and throughout Europe simultaneously, and incidents such as we've seen over the last decade. Now, I do anticipate that we will see incidents, and we are most vulnerable in our airports. Nothing has changed. I understand that a journalist just last week went through 50 airports with a mock bomb that was left undetected. So the airports are still insecure. But on the other hand, there have been so many attempts over the last decade to bring about terrorist actions in the United States, and they didn't occur because the FBI is on the job. In fact, Americans may be safer from terrorist incidents than they are from the terror of crime in our streets.
If terrorism does occur, who would be the agents, the people actually carrying it out? Would they be Iraqis, Saddam's direct agents, or would there be some of the terrorist groups that have been active for several years, many of them from very smaller factions of Palestinian groups, PLO subcultures and groups?
I think the latter is the case because, of course, Iraqis in the United States, as elsewhere, are going to be watched very closely, and by and large, we have no reason to believe that the Iraqi community here, the students and those who are still citizens of Iraq, have been any threat to the United States. So I think that we're going to see it coming from outside groups, possibly Abu Nidal and others of the PLO faction, the more radical faction. And again, those factions are still small on the scale of what we've been promised. But a plane coming down with 300 or 400 or 700 people is quite major psychologically.
What do the Palestinians, like in Abu Nidal, get out of this in terms of helping Saddam Hussein out? I mean, they are not Iraqis, they are Palestinians. So what is in it for them, aside from exercising pure terrorism?
Well, there's the ideology of thwarting the West and certainly of thwarting the United States, but remember, it's a good-paying job. And there is a degree of that as well, and thrill and adrenaline in being a terrorist. I don't think we've seen sufficient discussion on the airways of what it means for the terrorist to have that particular profession.
All right, Joyce Starr in Washington, thank you very much. And let's go back to Mary Alice.
The first full day of Operation Desert Storm was, as you can imagine, a day of nonstop activity for the Americans deployed in Saudi Arabia. NBC's Brad Willis followed the Allied onslaught from one of its launch pads.
January 17th, the Marines of Task Force Ripper woke up at sunrise to find themselves at war.
Waging now a military operation to liberate Kuwait.
None seemed to believe that it would happen this quickly.
It kind of came as a shock to me a little bit.
You could hear the rumbles last night when it was real quiet. It's like, wow, okay, it started.
Although well below the Kuwaiti border, in the early morning hours here, we could hear the faint rumble of some bombing to the north, dim flashes of light on the dark horizon. Before the war broke out, two soldiers in a heavily fortified bunker, thinking about the conflict to come and wondering why.
I'll probably see a lot of shrapnel injuries, a lot of pretty bad stuff, you know.
You know, everybody gets scared a little bit, but, you know, I think, you know, everything will work out to the best.
By morning, the war had begun, and an eerie calm had set over this camp. Marines waiting for the next stage of battle.
It's just beginning. He is a very big military, fourth largest in the world, bigger than the United States, and we do have a fight on our hands.
With the Marines of Task Force Ripper, Brad Willis, Saudi Arabia.
The mortality of war. Of course, the people at the Pentagon are trying very hard to keep casualties down. It is difficult at best to do in any aggression situation. We're going to go to Jamie Gangel, who's standing by at the Pentagon. Jamie?
Good morning, Mary Alice. Actually, the casualties thus far have been much lower than anyone expected. The sense is that maybe 10% of what they expected at this point. We've only lost 2 U.S. aircraft. We just learned a couple of hours ago that another pilot had been downed, a second pilot, and search and rescue is underway. 2 British planes went down, 1 Kuwaiti. That's pretty low. And although we've heard some reports earlier tonight about some ground movements, troop movements, Marines, I think the point to stress here is that for at least the next week to 10 days, we're having bombing missions. You're not going to see any great amount of ground troop movement where you'd have a lot of casualties.
The BBC is reporting that the British Desert Rats tank divisions were moving north, this is about 4 hours ago now, toward the Kuwaiti border. Do you have confirmation that American troops, ground troops, are going into position?
Well, we did have confirmation earlier this evening that there were some movements, but nobody's crossing over the line. What you're really going to see in the next couple of days is just a pounding over and over again of these different targets that we've set up in the first wave. The first wave were the command and control facilities, the SCUDs. We got most of the hard ones, but there may be as many as 75 of those mobile ones that caused the problems in Israel and Iran tonight. And then the other thing we're going to see is we're going to see the bombing raids go after these premier tank divisions in southern Iraq and northern Kuwait. These are the elite guard of Saddam Hussein's, the Republican Guard. That's what we're going to be going after. So again, the emphasis is going to remain in the sky, although we have had confirmation of some ground movements, but not going across the border.
How fast do they assess the Iraqi tank divisions able to move? I'm thinking about the difficulty in getting mobile missiles. Is it, is there a correlation there?
Well, as far as the mobile Scuds are concerned, you know, they're on the back of trucks. They launch one of those missiles and they can take off down a road and 45 minutes later be someplace else. So although it's been very important for us, it got fast and furious here was the expression when those Scuds started hitting Israel. And of course, we're trying to track those mobile Scuds. It's tough.
All right, thank you very much, Jamie Gandel at the Pentagon, and our special coverage will continue.
From Channel 4, this is a Gulf War News Extra.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sharon Puckett. Saddam Hussein had threatened to launch an attack on Israel if an American attack on Iraq began. Shortly after 6 o'clock Nashville time yesterday evening, that threat became a reality. Last night, Pentagon officials confirmed that Iraq fired several so-called Scud missiles toward Israel, striking several areas near the capital of Tel Aviv. The Israeli army says there were some minor injuries and minimal property damage as a result of the attack. Although details are still sketchy, some video has been released of the attack area. The pictures show Israeli police donned with gas masks patrolling the area. Last night, the Israeli ambassador to the United States made a statement about the attack on his country. Although details are still coming in, he says that as many as 12 missiles may have been launched at 2 Israeli cities.
There has been an unprovoked attack by Iraq, launching Scud missiles, or perhaps improved Scud missiles, at purely civilian targets in Israel. Jeopardizing the lives of both Jews and Arabs, Israelis and Palestinians.
Iraq has also fired several missiles towards Saudi Arabia, although all of the missiles were either intercepted by other allied missiles or completely overshot their targets. In Dhahran, air raid sirens wailed through the night as explosions lit up the dark Saudi Arabian sky. So far, there have been no report of casualties or injuries from the attack on Saudi Arabia. One of the biggest concerns now is whether Israel will retaliate against Iraq for the missile attack. Israel seems to be holding that option open. In fact, within the last 90 minutes has hinted it would. But so far, it has not yet taken any action. That is good news for the allies facing Iraq. Many of our partners in the operation are Arabs, and they'd have a hard time with the alliance if Israel is attacking other Arabs. Israel knows that full well and has kept a low profile throughout the entire situation. Here in Nashville, members of the Jewish faith expressed sadness over the attack on Israel. But many seem to feel that Israel will try and help the U.S. by staying out of the fight, despite the nation's reputation for swift retaliation for any attack. Again, no Israeli reprisals against Iraq yet, but no promise that it won't happen later.
The holidays may be gone, but there's one package being held over just for you. The Money Store Prime Package with fixed-rate home equity loans as low as prime. We're extending our holiday offer for a limited time only to help homeowners pay off credit card bills, make home improvements, anything at all. Trust the Money Store to give homeowners a prime package when they need it most. Call right now, 1-800-LOAN-YES. Program may be canceled without notice.
It's the people of the Insurance Mart that help solve your car insurance problems.
I've been in the insurance business in Memphis for over 25 years, and I can honestly say the Insurance Mart has the best rates.
I had a good driving record, but I hadn't carried insurance in a while. But most companies wanted to penalize me. But the Insurance Mart gave me a reasonable deal I could live with.
The Insurance Mart, we solve problems. Call us at Nashville, Rivergate, or Murfreesboro.
The pain of separation gets no easier for Operation Desert Storm families. Last night, a Nashville mother said goodbye to her two children, 18 months and 6 months old. Beth Prohaska is in the Air Force Reserves in Montgomery, Alabama, and her husband is in the Air Force stationed in Alaska. Beth's unit has been called back to Montgomery with a possible assignment of going to the Middle East.
No, I don't think there's any way to actually prepare a mother to prepare or a father to prepare to leave their children. You try to put it in the back of your head and deal with it later, and unfortunately later has come for me.
Beth says she signed up for the reserves to earn money for college. She was a student in Baptist Hospital's nursing program. Beth is a medical technician for air evacuation units in the Air Force. Taking a quick look now at Nashville's weather. Currently in Nashville, 35 degrees with clear skies. Winds from the southwest at 5. The barometer 30.25 and rising. Humidity 89%. Stay tuned to Channel 4 for continuing coverage of the latest developments of the Gulf War. NBC will bring you 24-hour coverage of the latest happenings in the Middle East. And Channel 4 will bring you local updates every half hour. Our next update, 1:25.
I have to make the announcement that tonight, Washington time, during the night in Israel, there has been an unprovoked attack by Iraq, launching Scud missiles, or perhaps improved Scud missiles, at purely civilian targets in Israel.
The Israeli ambassador to the United States announcing the first attack that escalated the Persian Gulf War. Allied attacks on military targets in Iraq and Iraqi-occupied Kuwait continue now, more than 30 hours after they began, and several hours after the Iraqis launched a missile attack on Israel. Several Scud missiles slammed into a densely populated Tel Aviv neighborhood before dawn, damaging several cars and buildings. 7 people reportedly suffered minor injuries. President Bush has reacted to the attack, saying he is outraged. The United States has assured Israel's prime minister that it is attacking Iraq's mobile missile launchers. Those attacks